spoiler alert, that scene in the end in the hallway where Mark chooses to turn around. I've read a lot of really interesting stuff about that, and the more I think about it and the more I read about it, the better it gets. Like I was seeing a lot of stuff comparing it to like the story of Orpheus from Greek mythology.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Joe's BTS show, where we break down everything from entrepreneurship and filmmaking to TV and movie reviews. Today, we're going to be talking to Conor Hernon, who loves watching movies and TV shows and reviewing them. I get DMs from him all the time about watch list recommendations and movie theories and what the next big thing is that's coming out. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today to be able to talk to you all about Severance, which season 2 of Severance just concluded about a week ago. I'm getting texts every single day from people who have seen the show and want to talk about it, want to hear my theories on it. So I just figured, hey, why not do a podcast about it? This will be the easiest way to discuss things about the show for everyone who's interested out there. If you haven't seen season 1 or season 2 of Severance, shut this off immediately and do not watch it because we will be talking about spoilers. All right, and Conor, welcome to the show.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, watch it or stop this, go watch that, and then you can come back. That's all I have to say.
That's some great advice. So I have been absolutely dying to break this down with someone. Actually, last night my cousin texted me at about 1, well, it would be this morning, 1 in the morning, and was like, I don't know who to talk to about this because no one's seen this show yet that I know. So he's like, I need to talk to you about the show. Tell me what you think about Severance season 2, what the finale had and everything else. So Conor, I'm going to pose that question to you. What did you think about Severance season 2?
Yeah, I mean, what did I not think about Severance season 2 is the easier question. No, I think the first season of that show was one of those seasons where like it was absolutely incredible, but the feeling that it kind of left me with was like there's no way they know where to go from here, and there's no way they know what's next. So like, what on earth is gonna happen? And I was kind of expecting, I'm not gonna lie, to be maybe a little bit disappointed by season 2, like not a ton, but it's just one of those shows where I was so doubtful in their ability to actually follow up what they had already done. And I think they proved me wrong in every way, shape, and form. I think the follow up was just as well executed and made just as much sense as the first season did. Are there still questions? Yeah, obviously, a lot of questions. But this time around, I have faith that they're going to be able to answer them all, which is good. I think there were points where it did get a little slow down the middle, but I also think that's a stupid thing to critique about a show because without the slow parts, you can't have the fast parts. And without all that setup, that finale wouldn't have hit quite nearly as hard as it did. And I think it hit hard as hell.
Yeah. No, I agree. I wanted to actually talk to you about that because I know there were a lot of people that were really upset about one episode in particular. It was the third to last episode. And it's mainly about, why can't I think of her name?
Miss Cobell.
Yes. So it was about Miss Cobell, right? And that episode, a lot of people were really upset about because they were like, this is dragging. This is the slowest episode. It was actually directed by Ben Stiller too, which all the other like great episodes are all directed by Ben Stiller. Like typically if a great episode wraps up, you're like, oh, that was Ben Stiller. But yeah, it was a great episode in my opinion, but a lot of people didn't like it. What did you think about that and why?
I mean, going through that and watching the season week by week, and especially with the hell of an episode that was before that with all the backstory on Mark and Gemma and their relationship, was it a little disappointing in the moment? I mean, yeah, like that's not what you're looking for after all of that. However, I do think, especially in the long run, if the show goes for 3 or 4 or 5 or however many seasons, like you're gonna forget the fact that it slowed down your momentum, and all you're gonna remember is all the information that it adds to the plot and all the context it gives. So I think like getting to hear all that stuff about Miss Cobell's backstory, like the stuff about getting raised in this town and like the old Lumen and a little more insight into the religious aspect of it maybe and the origin of Severance was, I mean, yeah, it slowed everything down and it sucked when you're waiting so long for, the conclusion and the heat of the action. But in the long run, I think that'll be very beneficial. And I think when you can go back and you can look at it not in that week to week mindset, it's one of those episodes that is, I think it is good. It's a good episode objectively. It's just people I think don't like it because of the way it slowed everything down. Like I liked it a lot looking back on it.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking about, right, how would you do it differently, right? And I thought about, okay, maybe you put that episode. That's a great episode, right? It's key information that will definitely be useful in the future. But um, maybe you take that episode and you move it earlier in the season. But then if you move it too early in the season, right, it slows down the momentum early on when the momentum is just kind of building for the show for season two, right? Because you kind of have to settle back into the show a little bit. Um, and so then it kills that momentum. So you're better off killing it just at the end and letting people wait because they're already hooked. Or the other option is you use it as like a subplot throughout multiple episodes. But then that loses even more impact for that episode, right? That story of Miss Cobell just becomes less interesting to the audience because it's just a subplot and they just want to get back to the main plot. And it's stretched out so long that any emotional attachment is lost by the time they pick back up with that story. So I thought they did it well. It's just kind of a hard situation to be in. That episode, I think, pacing wise, did not match the rest of the season, which I thought was a little bit disappointing. There's even just better ways to maybe edit that episode to make that, pacing feel a little bit more like the rest of the show. But I don't know. It's a hard one to do, right? Even the season opener was a little bit slow, in my opinion. Because it was a lot of just kind of like settling you back in that I didn't want as an audience member. I just wanted to jump right back in. There was amazing camera work, so that kept me interested. But there were a few slow moments throughout the show, I thought.
I mean, yeah, with that episode with Cobell, like I get what you're saying. It almost does come across as like it could just be something completely different and completely unrelated. And it's just hard because that's just information they want to give you for later, and it's a very difficult thing to include that when you might not see the payoff for that information for 2 years or 3 years or whatever. Um, and I also get what you're saying with the finale or the opening episode because like I guess the biggest question everyone was asking at the end of season one is like, how on earth do they go back to the whole severance thing, the whole workplace thing? Like, why would it ever keep working after this situation? So it's a bit of like info dump to explain to you like why it's still working and how it's working. And it's all worth it in the end. Like I'll give them that. Like thinking back on it, all those frustrations are just gone because they pay it off all so well.
Yeah, the payoff at the end was amazing. So let's talk briefly about the end of Severance. What were your favorite moments from that final episode, and what was your biggest?
I think the two things that stand out to me are obviously, spoiler alert, that scene in the end in the hallway where Mark chooses to turn around. I've read a lot of really interesting stuff about that, and the more I think about it and the more I read about it, the better it gets. Like I was seeing a lot of stuff comparing it to like the story of Orpheus from Greek mythology. I don't know if you saw any of that.
Oh, tell me about that.
So, do you know the story of Orpheus? He's like the guy, so his wife dies. Yeah, smart. His wife dies, and he basically goes to the gods and the Greek gods, and they see how much he loves her. And so they say, all right, you can go down to the underworld and you can bring her back up. But if you turn around on the way back up, she dies again. And on the way back up, the whole tragic thing about the story is that he loves her so much that he turns around on his way back up and she, gets trapped. And it's not like a direct comparison to that last scene, but I've just seen a lot of stuff talking about like Mark as Orpheus in that situation and the fact that he turned around effectively, you know, damaging. Like it's interesting to think about because you have two women involved, one on each side. But I found that to be an interesting comparison. And then the other moment from that episode that really stood out to me, just for whatever reason, I don't know why it stood in my mind, was when he's got the Drummond in the elevator with the gun, and he's like, you're gonna do this when I get to the bottom," and then he just dies. I don't know, for whatever reason, like number one with the visual of just Mark then being covered in blood for the rest of the episode. But also just like the shock of that in the moment where you're looking at this character, Mark S, that's just never, done anything like that or been involved in anything like that. Like the guy's like 2 years old, like so it's a real like moment of reckoning for him there. So those are just the two parts that stood out to me, I guess.
Yeah. So something I thought was interesting was I've been rewatching the first season of Severance, um, and yeah, it's amazing. So rewatching it with a fresh set of eyes, I saw an interview with Ben Stiller that he said that season one is like childhood, right? It's meant to represent kind of your first introduction to the world because right, all these characters are basically newborns, right? Um, so that's season one, and then season two is very much about like your adolescence and starting to come of age, right? Understanding what the consequences are in the world and everything. Um, and I thought it ending with Mark accidentally but effectively killing someone, and then intentionally and effectively killing someone, possibly, right? We don't know what ends up happening. I would be really mad if she ends up back, if his wife ends up back down below in the testing labs or whatever. I was like, when it ended, I was like, dude, forget about him. Forget about him. Just run. just run away. Get as far as you can. Oh my gosh. I was like having an aneurysm watching it on my couch. I was like, no. Um, right, right. And the amount of like everything that everyone else went through just to get him to that point and then to throw it away. But that is growing up, right? Um, and I loved that. It's having people who provide everything to you, set you up, do all these things to help you, and then it can just be that one person, like literally, especially girls, right, or guys, or whoever it is. It's that love interest, and this is in classic stories all the time, but that just turns your head, and all of a sudden, everything you were working towards and everything that everyone else worked towards and sacrificed for is out the window. Yeah, which I thought was an amazing visual to end with.
It was incredible. One of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen in a show. But I think that commentary about like adolescence is so interesting because I've seen a lot of people like asking like why did he do that? What does he think's going to happen if he goes back in there? Like he's got what 20 minutes to live. And I guess with that whole thing about adolescence, the whole point is that like it doesn't matter if it's like 10, 20, like whatever. He's not clearly not thinking it through. He's in love and it's his life, and if 10 minutes is all he gets, that's all that matters to him because it's all he knows. So like there really is no reason to turn around other than like logically. There's absolutely like it makes no sense because I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I certainly don't. I've been thinking about it a lot and I have no idea. But that I didn't know Ben Stiller said that, and that adds a whole lot of interest to that and depth about that decision too, I think.
Yeah, as you rewatch season one, you'll see it too. You'll see like very distinct lines that he draws for like them growing up and stuff, which is amazing. I love that they have that in there. And then also at the end, I loved their transition from digital to film in that final shot in the hallway, because that transition almost ages them visually for you at the end too, which is also really cool. I just All the storytelling going on in that show is fantastic. Their lighting setups are ridiculous. I just remember when I watched the first season, I watched like 10 minutes in and I was like, holy crap, this is the greatest cinematography I think I've ever seen in a show. It was amazing. So, yeah, really, really loved the show. So I compiled a list of 15 questions for you that we can talk about. Um, and I want to see what your answers to these are. These are all based on Severance season 2 and everything. What do you think is Lumen's ultimate goal? Do you think they're trying to like create a new consciousness? Do you think they're trying to find a way to kill people? What's going on?
I mean, it seemed like the point with the whole testing of Gemma was to create a severance chip that was so powerful that, any past emotions or past connection to that character and her real personality were just gone. Like that's I don't know I can't remember if they explicitly said that or if I just like spend too much time online and that's what everybody's saying. Um, but at least that's what makes sense to me. So if you're asking like what they're doing with that and what the purpose is, I mean, I guess there's a few things. If they really lean into the like creepy religious aspect of the whole thing with like the Egans and the goats and all that, then you could probably say that it's like attempting to create like a vessel or like blank slates to bring these people back. Um, I don't know. Or if you're being more, about the corporate evil kind of thing, it's just might be the perfect drone worker compared to the current severed people they have. Because, like, if you think about the way those people are working and they have to keep them to operate, like, it's in these, like, very, like, closed off, like, soulless, like, environments because they don't know, like, really how well that works. So, I guess it just depends if they go religious with it or not, you know?
Yeah. I think, I mean, this is what I've noticed so far with the show is it's nothing happens accidentally in the show, right? So I think every aspect of what you just said is going to happen in some way. It's just how it all connects and how it intersects. I remember I saw a really funny video online that was this person that were like impersonating the writer, right? They're acting like they're the writer of Severance, and they're like, "Ah, I really don't know what I'm doing with this show. You know, I don't know why I brought goats into it. I don't know why I did any of this, but just help me out. Keep writing fan theories so that I can figure out what to do that connects this because I have no idea what I'm doing with this show." That cracked me up because I was like, in a way, like I could easily see that, because I have no idea what's happening. They do a great job of using ambiguity to keep you interested in the show and just kind of tease things along the way.
I mean, yeah, there's still so many, like, they answered a decent amount of questions, but like so much of it is still left over, like to the point where like generally when it comes to like coming up with answers and theorizing about things, I'm decent at that. Like I'm pretty good at that, but I'm just like I'm still baffled. Like I've got to think about it for like 10 more hours before I can give you an actual like super solid answer to that question, you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, okay. So, question 2 on my list is what do you think the meaning of Cold Harbor is? If you remember, there was a moment where Mark is calling in sick and is talking to Milchick, and Milchick looks out at an ice block, like an iceberg in the middle of the ocean. And I was like, oh, maybe that's what Cold Harbor is. But then also, like what's the name correlation to the actual thing? I never really got from his other files because they didn't explain it very clearly what each name correlation was to what they were doing, and it might have no correlation at all. But what do you think Cold Harbor is?
To be honest, like it's got to be something to do with like so Lumen like originated in that town, right? From where Cobell was up. There's like a factory. Yeah.
Yes, they at least had some stuff there. What it I when I'm rewatching, they started out in the tech field is what people said at that dinner in the very first episode of Severance. They said, didn't Lumen originate in tech? And they said, yeah, but now they're doing a lot in like medicine or something else. So I don't really know. That seemed more like a factory kind of industrial thing, which I could see maybe being technology, I guess, but I don't know. I don't know what they originated in.
But yeah, so I would guess that like those names are probably either I mean, I doubt they're just random. So like if I had to put my wild guess out there, it would probably be like locations or things to do with those sorts of thing, like where that's from and up there because it's a very culty and like, grounded in their like weird freakish beliefs kind of thing. But it could also just be random or it could be something from like Mark and Gemma's life. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. I think I don't know what the correlation is really with those, but I do know that Um, my theory for what they were trying to accomplish throughout the series of them was to basically, when Cobell says they're trying to rebuild a consciousness or like build a consciousness, basically. Um, I have a feeling there's something where there's going to be basically Keir Egan is going to come back as either a baby human or a baby goat. And I have a feeling that there's some correlation between the goats and what Gemma was doing, and rebuilding her consciousness. And then there was also a correlation between, I don't know if you saw in the opening credits of season 2, there was like a baby Keir Egan crawling around at the end. And I was wondering if that's going to be Mark and Helly's baby is going to be like a baby Keir, which would be kind of crazy. But I was like on the edge of my seat throughout the finale because I'm like, we're gonna find out if there's a baby Keir in this or not. But then they never did. But there is also in the painting in the background right after they get off the elevator in the final episode, that painting with Mark completing Cold Harbor and everyone else standing around. There is a goat in like a suit that's like standing in the back, that you can see in there too, which I thought was interesting. So I was like, maybe it's a goat that's going to come to life or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually a really interesting thought because you've got the whole thing with what's his face, James Egan, coming down and talking to Helena and telling her that, or Helly, and telling her that that's where he really sees the spirit of Keir. So you can't, like, it's very interesting to think about the fact that maybe that's at least now where they've shifted their focus, or at least he's shifted his focus, is into to keeping her alive and making something of that. And then your whole like chip that can essentially remove or destroy like emotional connection and create a brand new consciousness. It's just weird to think, I guess, how they would put a different person that already existed into that, because that's like a whole different level of technology. Like maybe this was just the first step. I don't know, but it is interesting to think of it as kind of like a creepy lineage thing for Keir Egan because they do have a bit of a of an obsession with him.
It's a little bit mild.
I don't know if you can tell.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I was thinking about that with Helly when he says that he sees it in her. I was like, I wonder if she also could embody Keir, if they can like put that in the chip to basically rebuild part of her consciousness to be, Keir, or take someone else, sever them, and that person can become Keir from the severance procedure. If they can implant a consciousness or not, I don't know. I don't know how that would work, but it'd be interesting.
Well, I guess maybe that's what they're doing then would just be creating that blank canvas for that and with Gemma. But it's interesting too because it just didn't work. Like unless I mean I've seen a couple of things where they say like Mark came into the room and that overrode the chip and it was like the emotions took over again and love won over that. But I've also seen stuff that says like, or I guess the other thought would be that if you're given the opportunity to follow the voice in the sky or the person in the door, like that's not an emotional thing. That's just a reasonable choice. Um, but it's kind of cool if you think about it, where they really failed in that case on Gemma because love beat the chip. Because then you could take it, 5 minutes later in the episode, and you can look at the decision that Mark S made to stay, and his screaming wife is standing there banging on the door, and he turned around. So if their goal was to create someone with no attachment to their outside personality, then they really succeeded already with Mark. So I think that's just another interesting thing that I was thinking about the other day.
Yeah, yeah, no, you bring up a really good point there too. Of like maybe it didn't work with Gemma, but it worked with Mark. But also you see in their relationship, it seems like Mark grows apart from Gemma rather than Gemma growing apart from Mark during that one episode. And so maybe it's that subconscious, right, that helps him override it versus for her, her subconscious is still attached to Mark. So she goes with it. I don't know. Interesting. Hard to know really until season 3 comes out. Why do you think Gemma is the person that gets involved to the point she is? Do you think it's just because of her connection to Mark and they know it'll be easy to manipulate them, or Is it a blood thing because they're seen doing the blood drives at the beginning? What do you think is why they picked her?
Well, I think the reasoning behind the whole like fertility clinic stuff is they're preying on people that already have like because that's I guess where they probably found them was through that fertility clinic they went to. And so I guess it's preying on people that clearly have some at least some sort of emotional issue. Um, my personal favorite theory is that Gemma chose to go in, and there was some sort of explanation they gave her to take her away from Mark, some sort of treatment or whatever, and it was actually her choice, and she didn't know what she was signing up for, and then they got made it out of hand and chose to lie to Mark. But also like I think the whole connection between Mark and Gemma thing is just like a lucky stroke of genius thing from them. Like they maybe were doing this to other people, and all of a sudden it's like, well, if we can get someone who's actually connected to the person, like strongly emotionally, upstairs doing this work, then we'll have a lot more success. So I think the connection, maybe the choice of Gemma was an accident or not an accident, but like a coincidence. But then Mark ending up working upstairs was very much probably a stroke of genius on their part. But I like to think that she made the decision to be there. I think that would be cool and create a lot of interesting emotional problems.
I think it would be too. I was like, I just knew time wise they weren't going to be able to explain any of it, like her perspective talking to Mark or anything. But I was really hoping that there would be a period of time where she could explain, what happened. So, like I said, if she either dies or ends up back down below the severed floor, I'm going to be really pissed. But we'll see how that goes.
I doubt she would. They're not the type to go back like that immediately. Like that would be really frustrating to everybody, and it would take a lot of the weight out of the ending of that episode. So I doubt she'll end up back in there.
Yeah, I hope not. I'd probably just shut the show off and walk away if that happened. Um, what do you think of Rickon? Do you think Rickon's a goat?
No, I think that's the show's more grounded than that. I just don't understand how they would have that happening through Severance. I think you could put a consciousness into a goat, but to say that a person outside is also a goat just doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't seem like they've done anything so far that's like that fantastical. I don't know.
Do you think there's a connection to, like, I've seen stuff about, like, he's shown climbing a mountain, right? In that one episode with a flashback episode, right? He's seen, like, climbing a mountain, and he's not an athletic guy. And his pose is directly mimicking, like, what a goat would do or anything else. Do you think they've implanted him with a consciousness of a goat or something like that to study? Um, and also, why do you think the book is such an important part of season one and then is barely mentioned in season two?
I think it would be more likely that they wanted to take him as he is now and put him in a goat than to say that he already was a goat. Though I guess they are all based in this town. It's like literally like ruled by Lumen, so you can't really make any judgments as to like he existed before this or that and this. But I think it would make more sense to say they were going to take that consciousness that was already his and give it to a goat than to say that they took a goat's consciousness and put it in him. Though that would be an interesting back and forth experiment, I guess, to test more things with those chips, like what the capability is, putting consciousnesses in other people and such and such. Um, the book, did they mention it at all in season two?
The very beginning, at the very beginning. So, episode like one and two. And basically, the lady who always has the earpiece in, she goes by, and then um, Milchick goes by as well to talk to them.
Yeah, it is weird that they just like let it go. I mean, it served a very clear purpose in the first season to give like that inspiration and that sense of personhood to the innies in a way that they didn't have before and they didn't understand how before. But I am, yeah, I don't know where that could be going. Like he's writing a Lumen version of his book. I guess maybe just to inspire future consciousnesses they create. I don't know. It's hard to like think about these things because we still have like no clue like what they're doing.
Right, right. Do you think there's any weight to the theories of um like Milchick being severed, or the people at the party in the first episode of season 1 being severed, or anything like that? Because people act weird in the show. Do you think that that means they're severed, or do you think that they just act weird and that's just part of their character?
I think the show is like, especially in the first season, almost more so, was just very stylistically intentional with the fact that a lot of the characters were these like strange caricatures of people, and it added like a lot of that like whimsy and confusion to that first season, especially. Um, so, I mean, I guess you could make an argument that the reason that all the odd people are that odd, because you do have normal people, like especially when you're seeing like the outies of the characters that we know on the inside, like they all do tend to be actual regular normal people. So it's interesting to like consider that maybe there's something going on there, but I'm satisfied with the fact that it's just a stylistic choice. Like especially Mr. Milchick, like I just get excited every time he's on the screen because it's always like it's this great mix of of a little bit of comedy into this dramatic like thriller like mystery thing that I love, and it adds like it just makes it even more unsettling. So I'm fine if that's just like a stylistic choice, to be honest.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments of the season finale. I obviously always love his dance numbers, but the one of my favorite moments, I just laughed out loud because I was not expecting it at all, is when he just slides the envelope across the table and then just takes off running. It was so funny. And you can tell they weren't ready for it either, because the camera's locked, like he was just gonna slide in and walk away, and then he did it, and they just kept that cut, which I love. I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, right when that happened, I texted my brother who I was watching the show with before I went came back to school, and literally I think what the message said was just this is like the greatest Mr. Milchick episode of all time. And then the marching band came up and I was like, "Oh my God, it got even better."
Yeah, yeah. He got kind of creepy in the bathroom. He went through like a whole transformation of character, which was really interesting too. So, do you think Milchick's loyalties lie with Lumen or outside of Lumen?
I mean, Milchick has to have a redemption arc. Maybe not even like that's not to say his loyalties are with our protagonists or whatever. But they're definitely not going to be with Lumen because there'd be such a waste of all this like really I think pretty brilliant stuff, both writing and acting from the actor that plays Mr. Milchick with subtle commentary on like these undertones of racism in this company and the whole interaction and tension between him and Mr. Drummond about like the vocabulary. Like it would just be such a waste of all of that like genuinely like really subtle but really like that really I think speaks to people those little moments even though they're so subtle, and it would just be throwing that all away if he didn't have at least something coming in the third season or beyond that. I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think they'll go with to start the third season? How would you open the third season? Obviously, the last one kind of had a clear cutting point, right? You know where it's going to go. Where do you think this one's going to go? Where would you pick up?
Man, I pity the man that has to write that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's hard to just pick up like the moment you left off,
Yeah.
but it feels like the kind of thing where if you jump time, like it just doesn't really like it would be hard to then pull that all back together if you jumped.
Yeah, it almost discounts the amazing like presence of the moment we had at the end. It basically like would throw that away if you cut away from it.
Like there was so much emotional weight to that, and the acting was incredible, and the visuals were incredible. And after 2 years, I would like to just start in that same moment where they stopped. Um, And I don't know where you go from there. I guess it's some sort of revolution, maybe. I don't know. But I just want to see more of that commentary about whether or not the innies and the outies are actually, different people, or if there's something deeper than that and a deeper connection than that, because I think that's the most interesting thing that they're questioning at the end of the finale of this past season. And so that's just what I want to see more of, but I'd like to see it in a way that the last episode or the last season didn't. I'd like to see it just pick up from the exact same moment where it cut.
Yeah, I think right, the first season kind of ended off at an interesting point where it was um, you found out that they could communicate with themselves somehow to find out, you know, put together the puzzle pieces of what really was going on outside of Lumen and inside of Lumen, right? Which was a really cool revelation and a cool point to jump off with season two. And then season two established a whole new side of what they can do. And then it ends, instead of introducing, something new for everyone, it ends with introducing Mark being able to kind of fight with himself, right? Which is a throwback actually to the little playing card that Gemma has when she's doing the tests for Lumen, which I thought was a great tie-in. Um, but yeah, where he's kind of arguing with himself back and forth. I thought that was a genius way of, kind of establishing that between Mark and himself, right? Because it's how would you deal with your own situation. So I really want to see them pick up with that, more of that, and just showing more characters from Lumen kind of arguing with themselves, right? It'd be kind of interesting to see how those characters play off of each other and how each one deals with that differently and stuff like that would be kind of a fun different thing to do. I also kind of want them to bring back the overtime contingency. Just kind of that idea of turning people on and off when they're outside of Lumen. That'll be interesting. I've heard that like a lot of people are saying it'll be probably coming back now that there is this establishment of them kind of fighting with each other. It would make sense if they reintroduced the overtime contingency again and kind of played with that idea. I feel like that would be a fun episode or something.
Well, I think the idea of like the conversation between the innies and the outies was something that they already like, even in that last episode, for at least, I guess Irving is gone, but for like Helly and Dylan and Mark, they established three different relationships already between those three characters. Like, just from that letter with Dylan, you can see that. I think the big difference, at least between his outie and Mark's outie, is that he very much seems to consider him like another person, and almost a rival, even with that whole situation with his wife. Like, he's opening that letter with a ton of emotion immediately, directed as if you were speaking to a completely different person that maybe you don't like, but at least you have respect for and humanity for. Like, he didn't just brush him off and say, like, I don't want you to exist anymore or you're gone. Like, he said, I want to be like you, but this is my ground, that's yours. Whereas with Mark, you see, which, by the way, brilliant scene, one of my favorite scenes from the entire show, and I think that was the moment where I really realized that Adam Scott was doing something special in this show. Um, but I think the relationship you see there between him and his innie and outie is one a lot more of like at least trying to act like he's the same and feels the same as Dylan actually seems to, but he really fails in the fact that he loses the understanding of the innie's humanity, like almost the same way that like Helena Egan did with Helly. Like, he just brushes it off, and it doesn't. You can tell that it doesn't really matter to him. Like, it's him, but like you can tell the superiority he feels there. And so I think that's like a hugely fascinating dynamic. And Adam Scott just did that brilliantly. And I think he just added himself to a list of TV shows where the main character is just literally a perfect performance in that scene. But it's so interesting.
Yeah, this was the first show that I've watched that I thought really, what would you say, contrasted or whatever, was competitive with the level of acting in Breaking Bad. I think Breaking Bad is one of the greatest shows ever made. Um, and very few other shows balance that kind of like moral and psychological, weight that Breaking Bad has throughout the show, plus the acting and the writing and everything else, and constantly taking twists and turns. And Severance, I think, is finally like at that level. I think they're like basically neck and neck right now. I loved this season finale; did so much to boost Severance into another stratosphere of, you know, quality that a lot of other shows don't have. All right, to wrap things up here really quick, who are you rooting for, Helly or, um, oh my gosh, I forgot her name already.
Gemma?
Gemma.
Helly. I think the show is more about uh, the innies and especially Mark S over Mark Scout because it's all about that question of like, what is the humanity in these people and are they the same person or do they have completely separate existences? And I think the best thing that illustrated that that's really what this is about is when you had the whole thing with Bert and with Irving, and Bert was talking about I don't know if this is even true or not, but how he chose to get severed because he wanted to send his innie to heaven, even if he was going to hell. And I think that's like the real question of the show is are these people who are these people? And I think the relationship between Mark and Helly just really does a fantastic job of showing that that's real and showing that those are people and that there's something there. And Mark and Gemma, I just haven't been like I that hasn't been something that's been shown to me or that I've even been given an opportunity to become attached to. Like the only reason I care is because Mark cares. And I got to see some of the best TV I've ever seen with Mark choosing Helly, so I'm inclined to be on his side because that scene's just been playing over and over in my head for the last whatever half a week. Um, so that's my take.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I mean, there is always that part of, right, if they both leave Lumen, um, and their severance goes back to their real world, their outies, right? They would never end up together. But from what their innies are, they end up together really well. And that's part of just because of their mutual innocence that they end up like that. So I don't know. It is interesting. I've gotten so many people that are like, I'm so mad about the end. He should have ended up with Gemma, and I don't know. I'm torn. I'm very much in the middle on it because you see both sides, right? It's almost like two different people, um, and so that kind of brings me to my last big question for you here. If there has to be one, right? They don't live in harmony together. The reintegration doesn't work. Do you want in your outie Mark to win and be the one that survives?
I do have an answer to that question, but I think they're both gonna die because of the reintegration thing. That's where I feel like it's heading. Is they're just both screwed because the whole reintegration thing clearly killed Petey in the first season because he did not act properly and did not take care of himself properly. And so now you've got any Mark running around as a person with no idea that just happened to him. So I think they're both doomed. But if I had to pick one, and I think that would also be a very interesting commentary on that whole, personhood thing, is if neither of them made it. But if I had to pick one, I would go with any Mark because that would be a more emotional conclusion, I think, to the show, and it would be a lot more out of pocket. And I am a sucker for shows that hurt you. So if they all end up happy at the end, I am not a fan. And so I think that would just be a lot more of a divisive decision to make, and I'm just a sucker for that.
Yeah, that's fair. To Oh, how about me? I'm rooting for Innie Mark. The reason is Innie Mark has had a full arc, where Audi Mark I think has had multiple opportunities to choose the right thing and has not. Whereas Innie Mark has consistently, even when he thought there was a good chance he wouldn't come back from it, literally threw himself on the bomb to take care of the wife that he didn't have any tie to, right? So he did the right thing. He has no moral obligation to leave with her as far as he's concerned because he's not the same person. Right. And he got her out. So I think Innie Mark, to me, has more of the moral side going for him than Outie Mark, which makes me want to root for him more. But I do feel emotionally for Outie Mark. And you just kind of want to see a happy ending, which at one point feels very much during this show like it's going to be Outie Mark gets his wife back, everyone's happy, life goes on. But now doesn't feel that way at all. Right, right. It would have ended on the second episode or the second season. How many more seasons do you think they have in this show? This is the last question. How many more seasons, and do you think there will be a happy ending?
I'd say two, because there's just so much left to do, but they don't seem like the type of people that would draw it out for no reason. I feel like they'd end it after one if they had to, or they'd
I
end it
mean,
after 10.
Ted Lasso is the longest running Apple TV show as of right now, and that ended with 3 seasons. I think C was the other one. C ended with like 2 or 3 seasons. Yeah, now they renewed Ted Lasso, but its original scripting was for only 3 seasons, which seems to be kind of Apple TV's strategy, which is fine. I think 3 seasons tells a good story and is easy to get through.
There's nothing I respect more than when the creators of a show very, very clearly know and have told the story already in their heads and they know when they want it to end. And there's nothing that bothers me more than when they drag out shows for season after season and it just loses the plot entirely. And there's just the last couple are just like, all right, we need to wrap this up. And I have full faith in Ben Stiller, and I have always been one of the biggest supporters of comedians making drama because I think every time it happens, it's just brilliant. Um, and so I have full faith that he's told the whole story. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. I don't know who else was involved. That's just the name that comes to mind for everyone. Um, so I'd say four, and there's no way this show has a happy ending. It just wouldn't. Like the whole thing about it is it's so unsettling and it's so mysterious. And I wouldn't be shocked, number one, if it ended on just another cliffhanger. But I that would be a little disappointing. But I if it has a happy ending, I'll be a little saddened by that, I think.
Yeah, I think you have to see the story through to some extent, right? Your characters either have to live happily or die. But yeah. Anyway, great thoughts. Thank you, Connor, for coming on the show. We are going to cut for time. We're just under an hour. This is so far the shortest podcast I've ever made, which is amazing. But thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll see you again soon for something else. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and tune in next time for more movie and business shenanigans on this podcast, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for joining us, Connor. Bye-bye.